Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have their sights on the enemy as Clan Angron advances against Chaos. So for the Dawi forces, they're going to be led by Yumaiz, and Stratgame will be commanding the Chaos forces. And for the Dawi army, we do have Belagar Ironhammer leading the charge. He is going to be stripped down of all his items and abilities, so he's going to be quite cheap, allowing for a lot more funds to be distributed across the rest of the forces. And for those, we do have some Dwarf Warriors for that front line, with some Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. And of course, there is the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, the ROR. And in the secondary line, we do have the Ekron's Miners as well to help chew through some of the Marauders. And then it is going to be a line of 4 Thunderers behind that, going to be putting a hurt onto the heavy metal of Chaos. And behind all of those forces, we do have some Hammerers in the back, going to be mixed in with a couple more Dwarf Warriors. And there is the Dragonback Slayers, going to be throwing things in for some nice anti-large, and they do have a nice little chilling effect to slow things down when they are engaged in melee and doing damage. So that's going to be the flammable with minus 36 speed. And then that does also impute a little bit of weakness to fire as well. But that is going to be it for the Dawi. As for Chaos, is going to be a very wide Marauder front line, so just Chaos Marauders mixed in with some great weapons variant. And it is going to be Sartorial himself going to be leading the charge. He does have nice missile resist, and he is going to be bringing the final transmutation. So his abilities, yeah, he does have a 50% missile resist, so against the Dawi, not the worst choice in the world. Usually bring in Plague of Rust also does help to reduce the high armor of the Dawi, but for chunking through that armor, Chaos is going to be bringing quite a few chariots, as they do have 1 unit of Chaos chariots, and then there's going to be 3 units of the Gorbeast chariot, which does have armor piercing on top of the bonus versus infantry. So that is exactly what you need to help chew through those Dawi front lines. And then on the far flank for some mobility, we have some Marauder Horsemen and a couple Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes as well. Kind of a deterrent against any gyrocopters, which could be on the field, but there isn't going to be any of those. The Dawi instead going to be electing for a heavy gun line. Let's get things going, as the first shots have already opened up. Shots focusing in on Sartorial. Of course, he does have 50% missile resist, but that still means he's going to be taking some damage. It isn't going to be immunity, so enough focus fire will still bring him down. But the Chaos forces are going to be spreading across the front of the Dawi front line, as they do engage across all of the Dwarf Warriors. The Ekron's Miners going to be getting some very nice volleys here into the low armored Chaos Marauders, but in come the charge of the Gorbeast chariots right into that front line, as blasting charges do arc their way over. Be going right on into those Dwarf Warriors and moving right on through into the Ekron's Miners as well. But Sartorial also going to be mucking things up, as the Marauder Horsemen going to be trying to jump on top of these Thunderers as well. But there is going to be some Hammerers in the back, going to be sandwiching those forces in. But for the time being, at least a couple of the Thunderers are going to be offline for the time being. But the shots finding their marks against these Chaos chariots, going to be shattering this unit off outright, and these chariots really need to start getting into that back line. They should be able to just push right on through that Dwarf Warrior front line and need to shut down those guns as quickly as they can, because that is going to be a very big threat to them, and they need to shut those down as quickly as they can. But Sartorial himself, with a very nice, impressive amount of mass, is going to be dropping a juicy final transmutation here in the middle. Going to be taking some of these hammers down, as well as hitting the Dragonback Slayers as well. That is overcast now. Dawi do have a little bit of magic resist, but still they are going to be taking a nice juicy bit of damage from that cast. And the Gorbeast chariots now finally getting into the Thunderers, but they have taken quite a bit of damage on that initial charge, and they have these hammers still to worry about, and it's going to be pretty hard getting through all of that heavy armor. They are going to need the chariots to deal with them, so they really need to be a little bit careful with those Gorbeasts, make sure they don't take too much damage. But Sartorial is doing a very good job in that backline, able to break some of these Thunderers, and these other units are going to be getting routed as well. They are just terrified, so they will be back and ready to fire once again. But you can see the Hammers are still doing very healthy, as most of the Chaos front line is getting broken down pretty effectively. But losing all of those Thunderers is going to put a little bit of a hard time on trying to deal with all the Gorby's chariots. Usually it's not too uncommon to see Chaos, see the Dawi bringing the Rune of Wrath and Ruin to kind of slow things down, allow their units like the Slayers and other Thunderers to really put a hurt on those chariots. Right now the chariots going to be having a bit of fun time in the back lines. You can see these guys shutting down those Thunderers as well, and the Dawi forces are just unable to quickly respond in time, and they are doing a lot of havoc in that back line. And Sartorial himself is going to be a very hard target to kind of keep down under wraps, because he does have quite a bit of mass to keep moving to and fro, and the chariots are still very healthy, these two units of Gorby's chariots. And yeah, things going pretty good for both sides in some regards. Some of the chariots have been brought offline. The Thunderers are going to be opening fire once again, and they are quite a ways from everything else, but Sartorial, seeing that they have returned, is going to be making a beeline straight for that gun line, and is hoping to be able to route them right off the map, because they are so close to that white line, and he is unbreakable, so shouldn't have anything to worry about that. But the front line for the Chaos Forces is what's been buckled pretty heavily so far. Only a couple Chaos Warriors with great weapons are remaining. Everything else has pretty much been routed off, and even the Horsemen are taking a ton of damage as well. These three units, all of them routing to those Hammers, unable to stand up against them. And some of the Gorbies are getting quite low indeed, with a few units of Dwarf Warriors returning to the fray. But the Hammers are going to be really hard for Chaos to really break through, but they have been able to shut down a lot of the counters to the chariots, with most of the Thunderers being pushed off. We do have some starting to coalesce once again up on this hill and trying to train their sights on these moving chariots. But Sartorial is able to terrify this unit of Thunderers right off the edge of the map here, and that'll be one more unit that Chaos doesn't need to worry about, as they do pull slightly ahead in the balance of power, as Sartorial is so healthy at this point, and the speed and mobility is still in the advantage of Chaos, as they're able to pull out with all of their chariots, as Sartorial does keep the attention of the Dawi front line. And a nice juicy final transmutation is going to be going down right in the middle of all of these Dwarven warriors here. So we have the Dragonback Slayers taking a ton of damage, and they are only at 5 and dropping models. This might be able to finish them off, but not quite as, but the Hammers themselves definitely needing to whittle them down as best they can. One more of the Gorby's chariots does get routed off, but there's still two very healthy ones, and Sartorial going to be making its way up the hill, looking to shut down this last unit of Thunderers, keeping things under wrap as best they can. Then we do have another unit of actually... Oh yeah, there's the unit of Thunderers, very low in health. Wouldn't take a whole lot to keep them, get them routing once again. But these Thunderers actually do pull down the hill, as Chaos's attention is being focused more on the units up on top, trying to break the Warriors to Dragonfire Pass, and the Dawi are kind of scrambling to respond to all of this. They just don't have the speed or mobility at this point to really kind of hunt down the fast movers. I don't know why the gyrocopters are often a very common pick here. Allowing a little bit more mobile fire support is always very helpful, because these Thunderers a little slow on the draw. They can't really bring down Sartorial, and Sartorial is just jumping from unit to unit, keeping things occupied while the chariots run amok with the rest. But still, the Thunderers are sitting pretty strong, and the Ekron Miners are back as well, throwing in a nice little volley into these Chaos Marauders. Might be routing their own Dwarf Warriors as well, but the Hammers is what's going to be carrying the day in the late game for the Dawi, and we'll see if they're able to kind of hold things back. The Slayers are on just 4 of their models, trying to do as much damage to Sartorial as they can, and if they are able to get a little bit of a slow, that's always going to help as well, because even with a single Dragonback Slayer, they'll be able to slow down some of these chariots and Sartorial as much as possible, but they are just bouncing between unit and doing a very good job in the process. And now Belgar is able to kind of at least pin down one of these Gorby's chariots, but they should have no trouble in pulling right on back out. But that increase in mass that infantry does have against kind of larger targets, going to make that a little bit more difficult, and the mobility of the Chaos in the rear line trying to push things right on off the map on this very small map itself. And at this point, pretty much anything that routes over on this side is most likely going to be seeing itself right on off the edge of the map, as the Thunderers do take a nice juicy charge from those Gorby's chariots, but they are able to still stabilize their leadership. But there they do go, and they do rout, and is only a few feet away from that white line. But Sartorial is getting whittled down bit by bit. Balance power is still dead even, but he is losing the last of his infantry support, though he doesn't necessarily need it with his mass, and as long as some of the Gorby's chariots are still around, he's going to be able to just kind of bounce to and fro to his heart's content, as Gorby's get a nice little charge into these moving units of dwarf hammers here, and Belgar still just sitting at pretty good health. No real threat to chaos. He's just kind of there. He's a very cheap lord. He does have kind of decent stats. He has 450. I mean, it's 60 melee attack, 60 melee defense. Isn't no slouch in those regards. But yeah, he is not really the biggest threat, especially to the chariots, who are able to just kind of cycle to and fro. But they are really whittling down these units of hammers. And if you take a little swing back on these hammers, at about half health, and the chariots, though, still just getting a nice charge right down the line, knocking down that entire unit of hammers, and very well might rout them, but they are stabilizing. But there they do go. And there should still be some units left. I don't know if there's actually any marauders, not anything that I can see on the field. This is all that Chaos has left. And I think there is some Dawi forces off into the distance, just one of the Dwarf Warriors, nothing too important to be forgetting. But you can see that the Chaos forces are slowly getting whittled down, as the heavy armor of the Dawi are able to kind of just drag these Chaos forces through the mud, getting as whatever damage they can against these Gorby's chariots, as they continue just to cycle in and out of this Dawi formation, as away goes those Chaos Marauders. And that is the last of that infantry support, though they still have the Gorby's chariots, so that'll allow them to continue to cycle charge in and out of this formation with all of these units. And yeah, even the Dawi are slowly losing their own infantry. One more unit of hammers is going to be routing off the field, with these Ekran miners coming in trying to support, but are going to take a charge right to the face by the Gorby's chariots, going to be shattering them outright. And it is really almost just down to Belgar Ironhammer at this time, as balance power is slightly in Chaos's favor. Sartorial isn't necessarily a duelist by any means, but he is still a formidable foe, and he is unbreakable, unlike Belgar himself, who can be routed him off the field. But now all of Belgar's troops are being dispersed from the field. Gorby's chariots are going to be turning their sights on them, making sure they are chased off the field. And there is just one unit of Dwarf Warriors off in the distance, which I believe is still visible on both sides. It is indeed. And there's one more unit here in the back line for the Dawi. But they are kind of running for the hill here, trying to get an advantageous position to hold back the charge of the Gorby's chariots. I don't think they have really much any hope in regrouping with Belgar himself, as Belgar is going to have to stand alone against the chariots and Sartorial himself. But Sartorial, again, just going to be cleaning things up. So we're going to speed things up as Chaos does finish with dealing with the trash, so to speak, making sure everything gets pushed off the field, leaving just these center ranks of the Dawi for last. And here is those charges, breaking those hammers right off the charge, as the Gorby's are kind of avoiding Belgar. Belgar is going to be getting some hits in, though, and a final transmutation going to be going down as well. That is all that Sartorial really has in terms of spellcasting to be able to use, and now it is just down to the melee grind, as it is going to be Sartorial versus Belgar, and Belgar is going to have to hope that he can take down Sartorial, because he is not going to have a really lot of hope with these Gorby cycling him in and out. But as long as he's able to stand his ground and not get knocked around too much, he should be able to be landing some decent hits in. But he is getting very low himself in terms of leadership, and as long as Sartorial is able to get some nice charges in, a rear charge here or there might be just enough to break the back. But Sartorial is going to be pulling out, instead focusing on these hammers, making sure they do not regroup with Belgar. But that is going to allow Belgar to get a little bit of leadership back. He was getting very, very low, but Sartorial does terrify these hammers. They are now shattered, and we have Belgar facing off against the Gorby's chariots. He is able to kind of peel off one model here by the looks of it, and he is just getting kind of pushed around by these chariots, getting sandwiched here, and his leadership is getting fairly low. And we'll have to see how lucky his hits are going to be here in this late game, if he can peel off as many of the chariots. And so it is just going to be him and Sartorial But we shall see how this duel goes, felling one of the chariots with his mighty blow, and now Belegar Ironhammer is wavering one more unit of Gorby's chariots with a couple models still left. Sartorial cycling in and out, trying to break the leadership of Belegar, but he is standing firm with his very strong leadership and heavy armor. And Sartorial trying to bring him down, but Belegar will not yield so easily. Going to be wavering the other unit of Gorby's chariots as they do regain their leadership, though, in the end. But it is just down to one model between him and Sartorial. Now Belegar is going to be continuing trying to bring it down. It is sitting at just 844 HP. Sartorial's at 2,500. And Belegar himself is sitting at 26. He has 120 armor. It's going to be quite a hard target, but these Gorby's chariots do get the bonus against him. But this one does end up routing to Belegar's blows. And the balance power, though, is kind of edging a little bit towards center here, but it is still in Chaos's favor, as Sartorial is unbreakable, so he does not have to worry about such petty things as routing, and he does cause terror himself. But Belegar isn't immune to psychology, so he can be terrified. So if he gets low enough, that could spell the end for the Dawi. And luckily, though, the Dawi do have some forces here, which looks like they are returning to the fray, coming in to support their lord. So a terror rout won't outright lose the game at this point, as Belegar would be able to be chased by Sartorial. But if these Dwarf Warriors can regroup in time, it can provide a little bit extra support for Belegar, but he is kind of encircled between some fallen chariots, going to be limiting the movement a bit. Might actually prove a little helpful for these Dwarf Warriors if they're able to get here in time, but the blows are going to be exchanging, and Sartorial is ever so low. Some lucky hits by Belegar, and it is looking like Belegar Ironhammer will actually be able to take this fight. And Sartorial going to be switching his targets towards these incoming Dwarf Warriors, seeing that he isn't much of a match for Belegar, and he's going to be getting a charge off, but he is so very, very low, and I don't think there is any way that he's going to be able to carry against Belegar himself. Going to be getting a trying to break these Dwarf Warriors, but it will be for naught. And Belegar will most likely be taking the fight here. Just another hit is all it's probably going to take, as Sartorial is sitting at only 137 HP. So very low. Balance power is essentially no chance for Chaos. I mean, and the blows landing from Belegar, just one more will finish the fight. Sartorial is being rather resilient, but down he does fall, and the dwarves do finally win the fight. A very long, drawn-out fight in the end. We'll take a little look at that after battle report. Now, these values take in mind it is on... I did notice that the unit size was on Ultra. Normally, for any real tournament play, is going to be used on Large, because that is kind of what the game is balanced around. But Sartorial doing all right himself, getting 2k in value, 200 kills as well, and really his disruption was really what was his big benefit this game. Able to really keep all of these Thunderers under wraps, making sure they didn't get any too much value out of them. But otherwise, the chariots were the real killers for the Chaos forces, getting tons of value between the Gorby's chariots. And I know the Chaos Chariot got pretty much shot to pieces early on in that fight, and even some of these Chaos Marauders with great weapons did some decent work with their armor-piercing value, but they were no match for the Hammerers, as the Hammers were able to really hold their ground, racking up a ton of kills, not necessarily as much value, but yeah, it was just kind of the Chaos front line kind of wavered, but for the might of that Dawi armor. But the disruption that the Chaos brought was more than enough to make sure that all the Thunderers, and then they slowly were able to whittle down all of the Hammers, leaving just Belegar. But Belegar would not yield to the Chaos Chariots and Sartorial, and he did pull through in the end, defeating the Foul Gods. And that is going to be our fight for today. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good one.